I haven't thought much about what I'm going to say this week because I've been in crunch mode trying to get as much of this AI done as I can, and I didn't know how far I would get. I'm recording this late night on Thursday, and the good news is a lot of it is done and working, but it's still not a decent opponent. There are two main categories of work left to do: scoring improvements and performance improvements, but I'm sure there's also a good bit of debugging work ahead too. Right now performance is actually quite good, but that's because I've disabled having units move to every location in range, which they'll need to do for things like finding safer places to get out of the enemy's line of fire, or also moving into a location where they can attack other units, because right now they'll only attack something that's already within a line of sight. Now the good news is the performance isn't too far off. If I do enable moving to every tile in range, it takes about 5 seconds per action, and that's without multi-threading, and I haven't spent much time trying to look for optimization options yet. I know that once I get into multi-threading, debugging will get a lot trickier, so I'm trying to get everything else done first. Now without units moving around to attack, I can't really show you a lot of interesting gameplay footage, but I can show you another peek at how this is looking on the GDScript side for defining objects. Now this new AI approach has actually led me to rewrite or heavily alter just about all the code in the game, and the biggest reason for that is that everything now operates on a context, which may either be the canonical game state or an experimental state that the AI is evaluating. Objects also no longer store any mutable state directly. Instead, they get a state object from the context that they can call getter or setter methods on. Now there are three main pieces required to define a user-accessible action: defining it, validating it, and executing it. Optionally, there's also a describe method, which is helpful for debugging but may not really be useful in the finished game. If the action requires selecting a target or aiming, there would be additional methods to get the aiming spread and the list of available targets, but I don't have a good example of that right now. On the AI side, there are two main entry points. GetAIActions returns a list of available actions, and this helper method is used to define them, and score is for scoring the state. For every action returned from GetAIActions, the AI will create a hypothetical context, execute the action on that context, and then score the resulting state. I'd also like to call attention to gravitate here. This is used to score the proximity of your units to a location, so for instance, being closer to a crate is valuable, but it will only contribute to the score for the closest unit, because it doesn't need to send all of its units after the same crate. Speaking of which, let's look at crate for a more complex example. An action can be expanded into multiple other actions. For instance, move and carry results in a movement action and a carry action. The actual implementation for carry is implemented elsewhere and added to the list of available actions simply by setting a boolean on the object. Meanwhile, the move action is obtained from the unit that will be doing the move. And now to peek at a couple of more features, let's look at the door. Here you can see the door reacts to objects being placed next to it, specifically walls. Aside from updating its visual orientation, this is also relevant to pathfinding. As I've discussed in the past, objects are able to define a link between two locations through a set of actions. These links are implemented with two functions: getLinkCost and getLinkActions. Those are also pretty self-explanatory. The cost is used in pathfinding to find the shortest route, and the actions are used when that route is actually being executed. Also, a quick PSA for anyone else using GD Native: I didn't realize until recently I was using an old version. When I upgraded to Godot 3.1.1, actually a lot of bugs that I was having a hard time debugging just went away. So if you're still on 3.1, it's probably a good idea to update. I've also slowly been making more and more sense of GD Native, and some of the weird workarounds I was using before turned out not to be necessary, at least not on 3.1.1. At some point I might make a tutorial on this. I know some people have been asking for it, but if I had done it any sooner, I would have given you some bad information because I was still learning how to use it myself. So that's about all I have to say for Cargo Defense this week. And I'm sorry I didn't get a video out about the Game Jam submissions yet. I actually made one, but doing it as sort of a let's play and first impressions, I found that I was perhaps a little too critical on things. And of course you don't expect a polished finished product from a game jam. You don't expect it to be free of bugs, but I feel like just talking about the bugs as I see them is maybe a little too negative. I want to celebrate what people have accomplished and not talk about the flaws. So I'm still trying to figure out how I want to approach that, and it may end up being a very short video just sort of briefly describing and showing each game, but we'll see. I'll try to do that soon. And also before I go, I want to again thank my Patreon supporters, especially my very generous super sponsors, David Nurkala and Anthony Stonecker. As always, it really helps if you hit the like button, spread the word, and subscribe if you haven't already, and of course, thanks for watching.